Before I tell you this story, I want you to close your eyes for just 1 second. Imagine a street. Not a glamorous street, a real street. The kind where the gutters run with old rainwater and someone is always burning rubbish somewhere nearby. The kind where noise never really stops. Children playing, traders shouting, generators humming from the houses that can afford them. Now, imagine living on that street. Not as a visitor, not passing through, but living there, paying rent, raising your family, trying to hold your dignity together with both hands while someone above you squeezes and squeezes and squeezes. That is what life looked like at number 14 Bomba Street, Freetown. And at the center of it all, the woman everybody feared, the name people said in whispers even when she wasn't around, was Madame Gold. But here's what I need you to stay for, because this is not just a story about cruelty. This is a story about what happens when cruelty finally meets something it was not prepared for. When the stick that was always raised meets a hand that will not flinch. Stay with me, because what happened on Bomba Street will make you understand that in this life, no matter how long evil sits in the landlord's chair, justice has a way of arriving. Sometimes quietly, sometimes with both hands.
Number 14 Bomba Street was a 12-room compound. From the outside, it looked like any other building on that block. Peeling paint, a rusted gate, a narrow courtyard where women washed clothes and children ran between each other's legs. But everyone who lived there knew something that outsiders didn't. They knew the moment you stepped through that gate, you were living in Madame Gold's world. And in Madame Gold's world, the rules changed without warning. Her real name was something else entirely, but no one used it. They called her Madame Gold because of the thick chain she wore around her neck and the gold rings on 3 fingers of her right hand. The same right hand that gripped the long wooden stick she carried everywhere. Not a walking stick, not for support, an intimidation stick. A stick that had tapped walls, slapped palms, and knocked on doors at hours no decent person knocks on a door. The tenants lived in fear of 2 things: the end of the month and Madame Gold's mood. Because the end of the month meant rent. And rent at number 14 was not a fixed thing. It was whatever Madame Gold decided it was. She would increase it without notice, without reason, without apology. You woke up on a Tuesday morning and the price of your room had gone up by 15%. And when you opened your mouth to ask why, the stick would tap the floor once, slowly, and you would close your mouth again. She had a partner in all of this. His name was Inspector Bangura. Inspector. A man who wore a uniform that was supposed to protect people, who had taken an oath that was supposed to mean something, and who used both the uniform and the oath as tools to collect money he had not earned. Whenever Madame Gold needed someone arrested, Bangura arrived. Whenever a tenant needed to be frightened into silence, Bangura arrived. Madame Gold's muscle, her enforcement, her shadow in a uniform. Sister Comfort was one of the longest standing tenants. A woman who had lived in room 7 for over 5 years, who raised her children quietly and paid what she could without complaint. The month her youngest child fell ill, really ill, the kind of illness that empties his savings 10 overnight, she came up short. Just a small amount, a fraction of what Madame Gold spent on a single meal. And Madame Gold, in front of every tenant in that compound, in front of Sister Comfort's children who stood watching with wide eyes, beat her with the stick right there in the courtyard. And then there was Mr. Johnson, an elderly taxi driver, 8 years at number 14, 8 years of paying his rent on time, of fixing his own window when it broke, of keeping his room clean and his voice low. 1 month he asked, not demanded, not argued, just asked for 1 week of grace. 1 week. By the weekend, Inspector Bangura had come, put handcuffs on a 62-year-old man who had never hurt anyone, and thrown his belongings into the courtyard. This was Bomba Street. This was the world that Amina walked into.
She arrived on a Thursday morning. No announcement, no fuss. She was young, mid-20s perhaps, with a calm, still face that gave away very little. She wore simple clothes, carried a single bag, and she asked to see the available room. The room was a disaster. The previous tenant had left in a hurry or been removed in a hurry, and no one had bothered to clean it since. Cracked walls, the ceiling that leaked in one corner, a window that no longer sat properly in its frame. Most people who came to view it turned around before they had fully stepped inside. Amina looked around slowly. She ran one finger along the cracked wall. She looked up at the ceiling. She looked out through the broken window at the courtyard below. Then she opened her bag, counted out 6 months of rent in crisp new notes, placed them on the ledge with both hands, and said, "I'll take it." Madame Gold took the money without a word. She would say later that she had a feeling about that girl from the very first moment. But she took the money. She always took the money. For the first few weeks, Amina barely existed in the compound. She left before dawn and came back after dark. She was polite when spoken to and never started a conversation on her own. She did not hang her washing next to anyone else's. She did not sit in the courtyard in the evenings. She was quiet in a way that felt purposeful, intentional, like someone who had come to this place with something specific in mind and was simply waiting for the right moment. The other tenant watched her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. Who was she? Where did she go every day? Why will a young woman like her choose number 14 Bomba Street of all places when she clearly had money enough or somewhere better? Nobody asked her directly, and Amina did not offer. She simply waited.
It was a Wednesday afternoon when Madame Goat's bad mood came looking for a place to land. It had been one of those days. A tenant in room 3 had been 2 days late with rent and had had the nerve to argue about it. The small generator she used for her personal quarters had developed a fault, and something she had ordered from the market had arrived wrong. Madame Gold was, in the language of the compound, looking for somebody. She found Amina's door. She didn't knock. She never knocked. She pushed it open with her stick and walked in the way a person walks into a space they believe belongs entirely to them. Amina was sitting on the floor, cross-legged, reading. She looked up, but she did not stand. She did not flinch. She simply looked at Madame Gold with those calm, still eyes and waited. Scoff Madame Gold did not like that. She had not been in a room for 20 seconds without someone standing up in her presence since she could remember. She pointed the stick at the small candle burning on the floor beside Amina's book. "You are burning candles in this room. You want to burn down my building?" Anguish. "You want to burn down everything I have worked for?" Amina looked at the candle, then back at Madame Gold. "It is a candle," she said, "in a glass jar. There is no fire risk." Sharp in heel, Madame Gold's eyes went cold. This girl had answered her, had disagreed with her, had sat on the floor and firmly disagreed with her. Before she had even made a decision, her hand was moving, the flat of her palm swinging toward the side of Amina's face. It connected. The sound of it rang off the walls. Breathing, the tenants in the neighboring rooms went completely still. For one long moment, nothing happened. Amina's head had turned slightly with the force of it. Now, very slowly, she turned it back, and she looked at Madame Gold, but something had changed. Something behind those calm eyes had shifted, like a door that had been gently closed before, had just quietly, finally opened. Scoff Madame Gold did not, and Amina caught it. Not aggressively, not with rage. She simply raised her own hand with the speed of someone who had been watching and waiting for exactly this moment, and she caught Madame Gould's wrist in a grip that stopped the older woman's arm dead in the air, as if it had hit a wall of iron. Madame Gould tried to pull her wrist back. It did not move. She tried again. Nothing. She looked into Amina's eyes, and for the first time in as long as she could remember, Madame Gould felt afraid. She did the only thing she knew how to do when she was afraid. She called for Bangura. Inspector Bangura arrived within 20 minutes. He came with 2 officers, their boots heavy on the courtyard concrete, their voices already loud before they had even reached the building. The tenants gathered silently along the walls, watching. Nobody spoke. Nobody ever spoke when Bangura came. Amina was standing outside her room in the corridor. Madame Gould was beside him, her stick in hand, her chin raised. "That one," she said, pointing. "Take her away." Bangura looked Amina up and down with the slow, dismissive gaze of a man who had never once expected a young woman to be anything other than frightened of him. He hooked his thumbs into his belt, sarcastically. "You are coming with us," he said, "unless you want to make this difficult." Amina looked at him. She looked at the 2 officers behind him. Then she spoke, and her voice was very quiet. "I am giving you one chance to turn around and walk away. One chance. After that, this becomes a very different afternoon for all 3 of you." Bangura laughed, scoffed. The officers laughed with him, the way people laugh when they are very sure they are the ones in power. One of them stepped forward and reached for Amina's arm. He did not reach it. What happened next was so fast that several tenants later said they had to watch it twice in their memories just to believe it had been real. Amina moved, not wildly, not with anger, with a precision and economy of motion that made it look almost gentle, except for the sound of 2 grown men leaving the floor and meeting the wall. The first officer hit the wall to the left. The second hit the wall to the right. Both of them slid down to the floor and sat there dazed, staring at each other as if confirming what had just happened was real. Bangura had not moved. He was staring at Amina. His mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. He outweighed her by at least 150 pounds. He had a badge and a weapon and 2 men behind him. And somehow, none of that mattered anymore.
Amina took 1 step toward him. Then she reached out, and with one hand, she lifted Inspector Bangura off the ground. 200 pounds of corrupt policeman suspended in the air by one young woman's arm, his legs dangling, his dignity already somewhere far below him on the compound floor. And then she spoke. "Look at the people around you," she said. "Look at what you have been doing to them. You wear that uniform and you use it like a weapon against the people it was made to protect. You take money from a woman like Madame Gould, and you come here and you arrest old men who ask for 1 week of grace. You beat down people who cannot fight back." She let that land. Then she said, "Every second of what has happened in this compound today has been recorded. I have the video. Every bribe you have ever taken from Madame Gould, every wrongful arrest, I have documentation that goes back further than you would like. And if you ever come back to this compound for anything other than doing your actual job, every file, every video, every document goes directly to your superiors, to the press, and to every person in this city who has a reason to hear it." She set him down, directly into the open gutter at the edge of the courtyard. He landed in it with a sound that the compound would talk about for years, and sat there, covered in water and worse things, staring up at a woman who had not even raised that voice. The 2 officers did not wait for instructions. They helped the inspector out of the gutter, and all 3 of them left Bomba Street without a single word. And behind them, in the courtyard of number 14,
The tenants who had stood silent and afraid for so long looked at each other. And for the first time in a very long time, they breathed. Drop a comment below. Whose side are you on? I read every single one.
Madame Gold had not moved. She stood in the courtyard holding her stick, but it was hanging loosely in her hand now, not raised, not ready, just hanging there like something she no longer knew what to do with. The tenants had dispersed slowly, quietly back to their rooms. Sister Comfort had taken her children inside. The compound was still in a way it had not been still in years, and Amina stood across the courtyard for Madame Gold, and she simply waited. It started as a sound, something Madame Gold was clearly trying to stop, a tightening in her jaw, a pressing together of her lips, and then it broke through anyway. She wept. Not the crying of someone asking for mercy, something older than that, something that had been locked behind all those years of cruelty and control and had finally found a crack wide enough to escape through. The story came out in pieces. A husband who had left without warning, who had taken money that wasn't just his to take. A husband who had left her with a building, a debt, and a lesson that the world had apparently decided she needed to learn in the hardest possible way. That softness gets punished. That kindness is a door left open for people to walk through and take from him. The only way to survive was to become the thing she had always feared. Amina listened. She did not interrupt. Madame Gold's older woman had finished. The courtyard was quiet again. Then Amina spoke. "What was done to you was wrong," she said. "It was real and it was wrong, and no one should have to carry that alone. But Madame Gold," and her voice dropped now, not in anger, but in the kind of directness that only comes from someone who has nothing to prove, "the people in those rooms did not leave your husband. The people in those rooms did not take from you. They are here because they need a ruse, just like you once needed someone to give you a chance." Madame Gold stood very still. The stick was on the ground now. She had set it down at some point without seeming to notice. And she looked at this young woman, this strange, quiet girl who had arrived one Thursday morning with crisp notes and a calm face. And she nodded, slowly, like someone agreeing not just with words, but with something they had known for a very long time and had been refusing to admit.
The changes did not happen overnight, but they happened. Rent came down by 30% across every room. The building got repairs, proper repairs, the kind that had been needed for years. A small, subsidized grocery shop appeared in the corner of the courtyard, offering basic goods to the tenants and the wider community at prices that actually made sense. Madame Gold ran it herself with her own hands, and slowly, cautiously, the people of Bomba Street began to trust her again. Amina stayed for 2 years. She taught the tenants self-defense, not aggression, not violence, but the knowledge that your body belongs to you and you have every right to know how to protect it. She taught the children first, then the women, then whoever else showed up in the courtyard on a Saturday morning ready to learn. And then one morning, on a Thursday as it happened, she packed her single bag, said quiet goodbyes to each room in the compound, hugged Sister Comfort's children one by one, and walked out through the gate of number 14, Bomba Street. Not because her walk was finished in the way that walk is ever really finished, but because there were other streets, other buildings, other people who were still living under the shadow of someone who had confused a stick for power. Madame Gold stood at the gate and watched her go. The gold chain was still around her neck, the rings were still on her fingers, but the stick was long gone. And the woman who stood there watching, the woman the community was beginning to call by her real name again, the woman who brought out chairs when people needed somewhere to sit, who remembered birthdays, who kept the courtyard clean. That woman bore very little resemblance to the one who had ruled by fear for so long. And Bomba Street, loud, dusty, imperfect Bomba Street, was finally, quietly, and completely at peace.
There is something I want you to hold on to from this story. Something that is easy to miss if you are only watching the surface of it. Amina did not come to Bomba Street to destroy Madame Gold. She did not come to humiliate or to punish or to take anything away. She came to interrupt a cycle of pain that had started with one man who abandoned one woman and had been spreading its damage ever since, from Madame Gold to the tenants, from the tenants to their children, and outward, the way these things always do. There are people in this world who carry wounds they have never named, who build their walls so high and so thick that they forgot what the inside looks like, who confuse cruelty with strength because at some point being kind cost them everything, and they swore quietly, never again. But here is what Amina understood. A wound that is never looked at does not heal. It festers, it spreads, and the people who pay the price for it are never the ones who caused it in the first place. They are always the ones who are simply there, simply trying to live, simply trying to pay their rent and raise their children and make it through the month. Whispers to everyone listening right now who is inside their own Bomba Street, living under someone's power, someone's anger, someone's stick. Your quiet will not be your forever. Your Amina is coming, maybe from outside, maybe, and this is the harder truth, maybe from inside you. And to anyone who recognizes themselves a little too much in Madame Gold, who has been carrying a bitterness that they know deep down is costing the wrong people, it is not too late to put the stick down. It is never too late to put the stick down. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and I'll see you in the next tale. Subscribe to Tales by RM because we don't just tell stories, we tell the ones that matter.